Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I'm doing very well, thank you very much, and all the better for knowing that you're going to be joining me tonight to listen to a fabulous story. And I just thank you so much for your many kind, generous comments. So before we get started, go and get that perfect drink, whatever it is, and if it's something unusual, I'd like to know about it. And let me know what the weather is like in your part of the world, because some of us are very freezing indeed. And if you do happen to live in a part of the world where the weather is hot, let us know about that too. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, if you're listening to my story now, then I'm almost certainly dead. For if indeed I am not, then there would be absolutely no reason why you would be listening to this story at all. I'm not writing a diary with dates and times. I mean, what's the point of that? I'm writing my thoughts and feelings down upon paper. You see, I believe I'm going to die. I believe it will be very soon. I've been having premonitions concerning my impending death. These lucid, unambiguous dreams are so real. I wake up in a cold sweat. Sometimes my clothes are soaked, they're so wet. It's almost as if I've plunged them into a swimming pool, as you can literally wring them out. My mother was shaking me one morning to wake me up, as I could not stop screaming, while I was caught up in this prognostic nightmare, of which there seemed no escape. It's not just my palpable prognostications that make me certain I'm going to die, but it is this instinctive, conspicuous knowing deep down inside my gut, almost as if every cell in my entire body is fully aware of this inevitable reality, looming ever closer on the horizon of my life. I cannot see myself getting married one day or having children in the foreseeable future, for indeed when I try to visualize my future, I see and feel nothing at all, which is hauntingly airy, disturbingly discomposing. For like any aspiring progressive young person, I hope to have a flourishing job one day, a comfortable home, a beautiful wife and kids. But I don't see it. I don't see it at all. I don't see myself, even as a single unmarried man, living in an apartment on my own either. Believe me, I try to close my eyes tightly. I try so desperately hard to visualize my wife one day. Imagine what she would possibly look like, what kind of a personality she would have. I draw blanks. My mind is all but an empty screen that fails to play any footage of a potential future back to me. Of course, I told my mother about my bleak prognosis for the future, or lack of it, so to speak, as I'm not going to deal with this inauspicious, bodeful experience all on my own. Luckily, I have a mother who's not at all superstitious. She's the most prudently practical, pragmatic, and unidealistic person I know. She has never believed in the supernatural realm, or in the meaning of dreams, nor does she see my sixth sense as a harbinger of doom. She thinks all that stuff is hocus-pocus stuff and nonsense, which is a huge relief for me. She tells me exactly what I want to hear. You see, I get great relief from basking in her reassuring words, wallowing in them with a hopeful appreciation, like a hippo in a watering hole in Africa. I want so desperately to believe she's right, and that the grim forecast for my lucid dream is just a terrible fictitious nightmare that will never happen or come into fruition. Oh, don't be ridiculous, my mother laughs. Honestly, Giles, you rarely have a huge inventive imagination. Where are all these nonsensical, preposterous ideas coming from? Oh, I bet you've been watching some of those ghastly Netflix movies. You youngsters these days get so ensnared in all this fictitious stuff. It's hardly a wonder you have explicit nightmares all the time. For goodness sake, if I watched what you watched, I doubt I would sleep at night at all. I'm sure I'd wake up in a cloud of sweat like you do. That movie you were watching the other day on the Jeepers Creepers movie, with that horrendous monster sniffing people's bodies, devouring people so readily. I dread to think how you must be filling your head with such absurd, vacuous ideas. It's all so nonsensical, sweetheart. Of course you're not going to die, you silly Billy. She says this, ruffling my hair. You hear that, darling? She says, turning to my father, as she tosses the salad dressing into the leaves, and laughs brightly, flicking her long mane of blonde curls away from her face, with a nonchalant air. What's this about, darling? Says my father, reaching into the salad bowl and pinching some dressed leaves, which he pops into his mouth. Delicious, sweetheart, he says approvingly. You've got just the right amount of garlic in the dressing. Absolutely perfect. Our son here thinks he's about to pop his clogs any time soon. By all accounts, he's been having foreboding premonitions. Well, so he thinks, she laughs. My father laughs as well. Not at all concerned about my nightmares. He's reaching for more lettuce to toss into his mouth, which he chews appreciately. If he carries on like this, there won't be any salad for dinner. Premonitions are stuff and nonsense, son. You should know that, surely. You've probably been watching way too many horror movies, he tells me. My father, like my mother, is level-headed and down to earth. He works in offices in New York City, dealing with figures every single day of his life. His mind is factual and scientific. He's never had time for anything that's not based on fact. So dreams to him are just illusionary fictional impressions created in our mind to entertain us while we sleep, and nothing more than that. That's what I keep telling him, said my mother. You're a young man, Giles. You're 20 years old, for goodness sake, with your whole life ahead of you. You're healthy and strong. Of course you're not going to die. When I was your age, I never gave death a second thought. I believed I was invincible and would live through anything in the world. But for a young man like you to be so preoccupied with such a depressing, macabre subject, the mind simply boggles. I love those words. You're not going to die. I want to hear them over and over and over again. They're like a soothing antiseptic ointment to my troubled soul, momentarily ironing away my fears. But deep down in my gut, I know my parents are wrong. You see, underneath it all, I really do know I'm going to die. My girlfriend Miranda is not at all like my parents. When I told her about my lucid dream, she wasn't consoling like my mother was. Actually, she was the one that encouraged me actively to write my story down. You see, she believes my premonitions are accurate, that my mind is preparing me for my imminent death. I think we all know when we're going to die, she insists, pointing at the gut. Deep down in here, she says. Some of us, of course, choose to ignore it, pretend it's not there, but others listen. You're listening to your gut, Giles. You're courageous enough to acknowledge it. Most are not. This is not what I want to hear. I'm not remotely courageous. But Miranda doesn't sugarcoat anything. She's straight to the point about what she believes. I cling on to one hope, and that is she's frightfully wrong, and that my parents are absolutely right. Miranda talks about people who perceived they were going to die, and they did. Like that rather famous case in South Africa where Oscar Pistorius shot his girlfriend in a toilet cubicle, claiming he thought she was an intruder. Reva Steenkamp knew she wasn't going to live a long life, she exclaims to me. She even told her mother as much, when she drew a picture as a little girl of a staircase to heaven. She knew on a subconscious, deep-down level she wasn't going to live to a ripe old age. My girlfriend's unfavourable words are scant comfort to me. But I do like the fact that she listens to me, pays attention, takes my soothsaying more seriously, without cynical disregard and sceptical contempt. I believe you know when your time is up, she says, with an air of insouciant indifference. Miranda is not callous or unkind, just practical about death. It's not a subject that troubles her at all. She believes the soul never dies, we live forever. She's not bothered by it one little bit. Miranda knows a lot about death. She's read up and studied about it more than anyone else I know. She's researched thousands and thousands of near-death experiences from all around the world, from every religion, culture and ethnic background. She's investigated cases around the world of people who claim to remember their previous lifetimes with an uncanny accuracy. And this is all around the world, regardless of what religion they may be. She believes in God, Jesus and reincarnation. She told me that the Vatican has deliberately suppressed books in their ancient archives where Jesus talks about reincarnation. Even his disciples asked him if he was Elijah in a new body. She believes this is part of the agenda of manipulating the masses. She thinks our lives on earth are a school, and that we come back again and again to experience many lessons, and that God experiences life through us. I don't know whether I believe in reincarnation, or even in her views, although Miranda's arguments are very compelling, I must admit. But I'm pretty much on the fence about it. I don't really know what I believe, but I do believe in God and Jesus, so I have been praying continuously to live a long, full life. But unfortunately the feeling that my life is hanging by a shoestring keeps resurfacing again and again. I certainly hope I'm not depressing you telling you my story, for that is certainly not my objective. I also don't want you to feel sorry for me. That would be pathetic, for I'm certainly not looking for sympathy or pity. But I am looking for validation that I'm not losing my mind. Personally, for me, it feels exceedingly good to share my impressions with you. It helps put everything out there in a sense of perspective. I'm well aware in the West that we all too eagerly shove the subject of death under the carpet, avoid even talking about it. It makes us feel uneasy, while other cultures in the world are comfortable about the subject. Miranda is like that. So many find my girlfriend weird in this regard. But Miranda is fascinated by the things in life steeped in mystery, and death is one of those mysterious subjects that gets her every time. One of her favourite sayings is to always begin your life with the end in mind. Do you think I can avoid dying? I asked Miranda, hoping there is one way I could outsmart my impending death. I would be all right with dying at an old age, but dying like this in my early 20s without enjoying the fullness of my whole life ahead of me seems so desperately unfair. As you might expect, Miranda does not agree with me on this. She emphatically believes I would have made the decision to leave this earth school early, before I was even born. She thinks I would have fully discussed this in my soul contract with my guides. You know what, she says, I don't know about whether the time of our death is written to be an exact date or time, but I do know there are people who believe there are exit points in our lives when we can subconsciously choose to leave at the right time for our soul. I don't know the answers to that question. I certainly wish I did, but I'm not God. I could offer you comfort, Giles, tell you what you want to hear, but I'm certainly not going to do that. Suffice to say, my lamentable premonitions were always the same. It first started with an inauspicious, baleful feeling that something was watching me in my dream. It sent chills pulsating down my spine. All I knew was I wanted to run away as fast as I could. I could see myself being hemmed in from every direction by viridescent green vegetation that twinkled with the dew of raindrops. There were towering trees in my premonition that launched their vertical trunks into the heavens like tall, masterful skyscrapers that were so gargantuan and imposing you could see their leafy green heads that arched above me at a vast height to form a canopy. Soft twinkling shafts of sun danced through the bronze boughs, dappling the floor in an ethereal light, infusing the vegetation in contrasting hues and shades of green. I felt trapped and confined in the space, as if I couldn't breathe, as if something was sitting on top of my lungs, crushing my oxygen supply, so my very breath was expunged from me. I knew I needed to run, as there was no way out of this maze-like place, this sumptuous, lush, tropical oasis that was reminiscent of a rainforest. Regretfully, the beauty was confiscated by my fear. I was wearing a white loincloth, while my golden torso was naked. My feet were bare, as I walked on the earthen floor, or ran. I had been in this place before. It brought me solace and comfort, but not today. I could feel something was loitering in the dark shadows, stalking me. I could see a dark face, bright yellow eyes staring at me. Then I heard the low roar. It was a black leopard, pressing his paws on the ground, moving stealthily towards me. He pulled back his lips to expose his sharp, treacherous canine teeth. He roared and ran towards me, pouncing upon me. My body fell back on the earthen floor. I tried to scream, but I could not. The animal tore off my arm and began to eat it. Thankfully, the pain was anaesthetized by my shock and disbelief. I watched him tearing my flesh away from the bone, chewing every morsel of my arm. I could feel my arm throbbing. I became lightheaded as I lay there bleeding out, while the blood drained from my body. until I found myself floating, drifting away above the canopy. I could hear a female voice saying, "Your time is almost up. Not long now." I knew the message was for me. I had been forewarned that my life would soon be demanded from me. It would seem anyone whom I told my foreboding premonitions to shunned it as if it was just a silly dream, and much like my mother dismissed it as my overreactive imagination. But not Miranda. She was the only one who believed me, trusted in my word, the only one that sensed my message was a pregnant warning from beyond the grave, revealing to me of what soon was to be birthed or come to pass in my life. Then it happened one day, as me and my girlfriend had got on an escalator at Macy's in Fifth Avenue, with shopping bags in our hands. We'd been buying some winter gloves and scarves. We were both on that escalator. In a trice, a portentous, percussive feeling of anxiety overcame me, like the apprehension I'd experienced in my inauspicious nightmare. It was the exact same presentiment of trepidation, rather like a familiar song you hear playing on the radio. This foreboding sharpened my attention, alerting me to a sense of danger. My heart began thumping violently in my chest. I wanted to get off the escalator as quickly as I possibly could. The urgency was overwhelming and intense. Then it happened. I could hear a man's voice screaming, "Stop him! Stop him now! Don't let him get past!" This hefty man came bounding down the escalator and with one forceful thrust shoved me off the moving stairs, so I went stumbling over the stairs, landing headfirst on the floor below. He immediately ran over me, as if I was all but a slight obstacle in his path, and of little significance. The 2 police officers remained hot on his trail, racing directly after the man, while one officer, on seeing me lying there, stopped to call an ambulance. I lay there on the floor motionless, with my eyes seemingly glazed over. Miranda thought I was dead, as did many of the horrified bystanders who were visibly upset. "Oh my God, he's dead!" people were saying. "He's dead! The man pushed him over and killed him!" My girlfriend was anxiously leaning over me, assuring the worried gathering of people that there was still a faint pulse. The EMTs arrived on the scene. I was hurriedly thrown onto a gurney, pushed into an ambulance with my girlfriend holding my hand. I arrested in the back of the ambulance, but the EMTs efficiently brought me back from the precipice of death. I remember waking up in hospital to see the doctor hovering over my bed, smiling at me with a broad beam. "I'm very happy to see you up, Giles. We had you in an induced coma for a while to bring down the swelling on your brain. It was touch and go for a moment. We almost lost you. Do you remember anything?" I shook my head. I had vague memories of voices in the background, people rushing around backwards and forwards. But other than that, my memories remain hazy and obscure, like a misty photograph upon which you failed to observe all the details. Both my normally stoic parents were now very panicked when they came to visit me in hospital. Their nonchalant, easygoing attitude had evaporated. Both of them looked weighted down with worry and anxiety. My close call with death had left them more than a little unhinged. "I told you, Mum," I said to her. "My premonition is coming true. The spirit of death is trying to take me away." "Oh, for goodness sake, don't be so ridiculous, Giles," said my mother. "Don't talk such nonsense." But her voice sounded strained, as if she was beginning to doubt her own words. "What happened, sweetheart?" she said, her forehead breaking out into worried furrows. "I don't understand. Please explain to me. What happened? You were shopping at Macy's." "That's right. I was shopping at Macy's. A thug was escaping from the police. He pushed me off the escalator. I landed head first on the floor. The doc says it's amazing I didn't crack open my skull like an egg. It's a miracle, Mum, that I'm still alive." My mother took my hand in hers, giving it a tight, firm squeeze. "You know what, darling? Maybe your dream was telling you that you would have a close call with death, but you're right as rain now, aren't you? You didn't die, did you? There you are. I told you that you wouldn't die. I was right. I read somewhere that the most things we fear, well, most of them, don't come true at all. I also believe lightning does not strike in the same place twice. What do you think?" she said, turning to my father. "I think all this negative talk of dying is preoccupying your mind, son. It's what you think about all the time. It's not healthy. Maybe focusing on death so much made you will this accident to happen." I wanted to believe my parents were right. I really did. I clung on to their belief system like a person stranded out on the ocean, clinging to a lifeboat, hanging on to the desperate hope that they will be rescued. But somewhere deep down in their gut, they knew that help was not forthcoming. So yes, I was using my parents' words, rather like lifeboats that I could cling to. It was awfully convenient. My mother had said that my premonition was just warning me of something that never happened, nor would ever come to pass, while my father thought I'd willed my accident to manifest in my reality. So why is it that the ominous reoccurring vision kept returning over and over again? I did not believe the forest or the black leopard were literal interpretations of the premonition, not at all. I thought they were symbolic messages of a destiny I couldn't avoid. My mother was now waking me up regularly when I would be screaming in my bed, claiming I'd experienced yet another horrifying forecast. My mother grabbed my hand, squeezing it tight. I noticed her normally long nails had been bitten to the core, that her relaxed demeanour was much more stressed out, as if she was finally taking my premonitions more seriously and giving them more credence. "I don't understand why you keep having these dreadful dreams," she said to me. "Surely there's something we can do about it. I was thinking you could go and speak to a therapist. It's not good living with this dark cloud hanging over your life like this. You surely realise that lots of people have nightmares where they see themselves falling down a cliff, but nothing bad ever happens to them." "I've had nightmares before, Mum. They've never troubled me. But this is different. It's hard to explain. It's like a heightened intuition telling me to pay attention, or like a book telling me what is written in the next chapter. It's most unfortunate that you feel as if your life is running out. It worries me that you are so insistent about this, darling. You really must live every day to the fullest. After all, is not our life meant to be happy? The truth is, darling, we're all in exactly the same boat. You, me, your father, everybody in the entire world. We wake up every morning, regardless of our age or culture, with the same risk of dying every day, as accidents do happen to us. None of us are immune to this grisly fact. Sometimes people are at the right place at the wrong time and are run over by a bus. It does happen. But dwelling over what could be is futile. It's toxic to your health." I was reflecting about my mother's words for a moment. She had certainly made some good points. But supposing, Mum, the person run over by the bus, hypothetically, was at the right place at the right time, because they were meant to be run over by that bus. And if the bus didn't take them, something else would, as they were predestined to die, like I nearly died on the escalator at Macy's, but I didn't. So maybe some other anomalous, unlikely event might take me next time. Like that movie, Final Destination. Do you remember that one? "Darling, you're scaring me again," said my mother. "I'm going to organise a therapist for you at once. We simply can't continue to live in this gloomy environment as a family for a moment longer. Dwelling on such macabre thoughts daily is not right for someone so young. It's effectively destroying the household. Look at me, I've started to bite my nails. The last time I did this was over exams at school. I was sure I would fail, but I didn't, of course. My depressing outlook was consuming me, as is yours. We need to sort this out. No son of mine should be going through this kind of stress. You need to talk to someone about these insane dark thoughts of yours." So yes, my mother did take me to a therapist. Mrs. Piper, the therapist I went to see, was one of these people as dismissive about dreams, nightmares and premonitions like my mother had been. She studied me through her astute brown eyes and said, "Giles, I think what we're dealing with here is a profound fear of death. You'd be surprised to know that just like a fear of spiders or snakes, I counsel many clients who visit me regularly for counselling who have a terror of dying. I have agoraphobic clients who are afraid of leaving their homes as they think that something terrible is going to happen to them. It's this intrinsic fear that unfortunately hijacks their lives. In your case, you need to address this fear you're having of dying. If we don't, it could cripple your daily routines, rob you of living a normal, productive, enjoyable life, confiscate your freedom, steal your confidence. You're feeling insecure, vulnerable and afraid. We need to tackle this fear head on and face it." "Look, Mrs. Piper," I exclaimed, "I'm not afraid of death, if that's what you think. I know it happens to us all. I just believe I'm going to die soon, and that my dream is a warning premonition. What you don't get is death is not actually a fear of mine. I'm not afraid to live my life or to leave my house every day, embracing my normal daily routines. Not at all. I'm not even worried if I'm run over by a bus. That doesn't really matter to me, nor does it trouble me a jot. I don't look over my shoulder worrying about my imminent death. But you do have a fear of this premonition of yours, do you not?" "I don't have a fear of the premonition itself. But your mother says you wake up in a cold sweat, that you're screaming your lungs out. It's because I'm reacting to the fear the dream instills in me. At the time, the dream is so hauntingly real, it's as if I'm caught up in a frightening situation from which I can't escape. That is what terrifies me." "All right," said Mrs. Piper. "Look at it in another perspective, will you then, Giles? Hypothetically speaking, if this premonition were indeed true, what do you feel about the message it conveys to you?" "I'm not bothered about dying, Mrs. Piper, as I keep reiterating, if that's what you're getting at, but I'm bothered about my life being cut short. You see, I can't see a future for myself, even if I try my damnedest to visualize one. I can't see it," I said, pointing to my gut. "I have the sagacious intuitive knowing that I know I'm not on this earth for a long time, with every fibre of my being, as if a divine intelligence, or God himself if you like, is foretelling my journey ahead, or lack of it, so to speak." "So you're scared of what you think you know is your ultimate outcome?" "No, I'm not scared. I'm disappointed, very disappointed, because I want to have a full life, not one fortuitously shortened." "Well, then that's what you must do. Why do you not allow this premonition to abandon your mind? You're allowing it to consume your focus. Instead of enjoying yourself, you're thinking about your premonition over and over again. It's overtaking your life like a dark cloud that won't leave you alone." I reflected on what the therapist was saying to me. I knew she was absolutely right. My premonition was definitely stealing my joy, for I thought about little else. It entertained my imaginings night and day. I carried it with me wherever I went, like a heavy bag of books that was wearing me down, eroding my happiness, pounding away at my mind like a woodpecker hammering the trunk of a tree with its determined beak. I needed to let it go, like a hot air balloon on the wind. I needed to release my disappointment, along with the ill-boding message it contained. "You know, Giles," said Mrs. Piper, "supposing your premonition were true for a moment, I'd like you to entertain that possibility for a second. You'd be no different to a youngster in a hospital bed being told by their doctor that they didn't have very long to live. You would have to face your death, knowing it was around the very next corner. You'd have to make peace with that knowledge. If you were that cancer patient, what would you do? Put yourself in their shoes for a moment. Imagine the doc saying, 'Son, you're dying. There's not much time left. We can't do anything more for you now.'" I thought about it for a moment. "Well, I'd want to do as many wonderful things as I could before I died. I'd want to make the most of every single day. I wouldn't allow myself to think about death a moment longer. Even if I had nightmares about it, I would ignore them." "Exactly. So you must do the very same." I realised that going to see Mrs. Piper was the best decision my mother could have ever made on my behalf. For instead of discussing my premonition, I chose to ignore it completely. I refused to give it house room. I began to live my life to the fullest, never certain about what each day would hold, but not worrying about its prognosis either. I mean, what was the point? On the next session with my therapist, she got some hot air balloons for me, and we put the elements of my forebodings on the balloons. I wrote black leopard on one balloon with a black marker pen, releasing the balloon up into the heavenlies. I put rainforest on another balloon, anxiety on another, disappointment on the other, foreboding, grief, loss, frustration, nightmares, premonitions, lucid dreams on all the other balloons, releasing each and every one up into the sky, watching them all float away until they were finally gone. It felt so liberating. We were letting go of everything that had relentlessly beheld my attention and focus. Mrs. Piper asked me to speak to my premonition, and I did. I addressed it personally. I said, "Mr. Premonition, I acknowledge your message. I receive it, although I will not entertain it. However, I would like you to leave me alone. I don't want you to return again. You are no longer welcome in my life. I would urge you to go and not come back again." "See, well done, Giles. Your premonition has gone," said Mrs. Piper. "Now just go out and live your life. Enjoy yourself." Ostensibly, a funny thing did happen. After addressing my premonition, releasing all the balloons and the lucid forebodings and nightly visions, just left. Even my mother stopped biting her nails again, and I was no longer walking on eggshells or screaming in the middle of the night, and a peaceful acceptance of whatever the future may or may not hold for me. Miranda's story. My boyfriend Giles was never a really spiritual person, so when he first began talking about his premonition, I was bewildered. I certainly was surprised about his insistence that he was going to die soon. I remember him saying, "Miranda, I know I'm going to die." When he announced this and that he couldn't envisage a future or imagine himself being married, I took him at his word. You see, I've always believed in reincarnation. I thought Giles was remembering a part of his soul contract that he'd discussed with his guides before he was born, when he had agreed for his life to be cut short in this lifetime. I know a lot of deeply religious people who would argue with me tirelessly about this, and they do. They will insist reincarnation is not a part of our lives. But how can they know the deepest mysteries that life entails for us? In my opinion, reincarnation explains a lot. Why do some babies die in childbirth and are denied a life? It would make our human experience exceedingly unfair. But this would not be the case if we had many lifetimes. Do I believe in God and Jesus? Yes, I emphatically do. I do believe, based on a lot of my research, that much of the Bible has been hidden from us for the purposes of a manipulative agenda by the powers that be. That's my humble opinion. Whether it's right or wrong doesn't really matter. I feel that Giles's premonition was revealing to him that time was almost up for him. Most of us don't remember our soul contracts. We're not meant to. But I believe he'd remembered his, or at least his subconscious mind was reminding him of it. Of course, his parents were highly dismissive about his revelations, believing that he was just experiencing a lucid nightmare, and that was all it was, and they would never amount to anything. Although I will agree that a lot of fears never do come to pass. I wasn't so sure about Giles's case. Of course, when Giles had this random accident at Macy's on Fifth Avenue in New York, his parents began to take him more seriously. It would seem that he came a hair's breadth away from losing his life that day. Even the doctors affirmed it was a miracle he was alive. I was in the ambulance that day when he went into cardiac arrest. Believe me, it was touch and go for a while. We so nearly lost him. I did wonder if that could have been one of his possible exit points in his soul contract, where he would leave this world. It had been a close call, far too close for comfort, I regret to say. I do remember his mother asking me what I thought. I told her I believed premonitions were real, not all of them, but some of them. People had them all over the world. Sometimes people sensed a family relative was going to die, and it happened. Or they knew that they shouldn't take that flight, or something bad would happen, and those warning premonitions came to pass, sometimes saving their lives. I certainly know when the 9/11 disaster happened, many highly intuitive people never went to work that day, instinctively listening to their bodeful warnings and their guts. Something was going to go horribly awry. So that fact made them pay attention, and they didn't go to work that day, which may well have saved their lives. It was then that Giles's mother confided something in me. I knew she wanted to share her troubles with me. "Please don't tell Giles I'm telling you this," she said to me. But I did try to imagine my son married with children. But I couldn't visualize that scenario, as hard as I tried. It scared the hell out of me. You see, I could easily envisage my daughter married, but not Giles. "What do you think about that? What do you suppose that means?" I told her. I feel exactly the same way. I tried to imagine Giles married with children myself. The images didn't flow naturally into my imagination. They did so with great difficulty. All we need to do is enjoy our lives, I told her. I think we should take Giles's premonition as a gift to us. I mean, how many parents who lose their children would have done things so differently if they had known how fleeting their child's lives would actually be? They would spend as much quality time as possible with the child that was about to die, would they not? You know, Miranda, you're absolutely right, she said, kissing me lightly on the forehead with her lips. Thanks for that. Thanks for talking sense to me. From now on, I'm going to make it my mission to spend more time with my son, just in case his premonition is true. It would seem Giles relinquished his former agitations. He began to thoroughly enjoy his life. There was a distinctive skip in his step, a mischievous naughty twinkle in his eyes. His laughter filtered through the atmosphere daily, as he made up some rather ludicrous jokes that we thoroughly enjoyed. Ostensibly a wonderful thing had metamorphosized in his life. The heavy forebodings had been lifted off him, that had so preoccupied his focus like a demanding toddler screaming to be heard. It had completely gone. It would seem Giles refused to give those hassling thoughts house room, so the harrowing nightmares dissipated like the steaming vapour from a boiled kettle, or like the dying embers of a fire, until they were no more. Giles was very eager to explore the natural world again. I'd heard of transfixing woodland trails outside of New York, where we could go hiking. When most people think of New York, they think of a vibrant, bustling city, and that's true, of course, but there is so much more to New York than meets the eye. Many people fail to realise there are lots of areas around New York that are distinctly rural, with a plethora of rich forests, especially if you fancy poking around villages and towns full of rustic charm. It has everything from cycling in the Adirondack Mountains or scuba diving in Long Island South. Believe it or not, 61% of the state is heavily forested. Most of the forests are made up primarily of oak, hickory, tulip and sweet gum trees. So parts of New York rural? Most definitely yes. After Giles had decided to live every day to the fullest, we began spending a lot of time in nature, exploring woodland areas outside of New York. But this was the day I will account to you when Giles's premonition came sadly to pass. It had started like any normal day. There was nothing about that day that sang out to me with a sense of foreboding that this day was going to be different to any other. But I assure you, it most certainly was. Giles and I had decided to go for a hike in a pretty woodland area, outside a rustic town. I'd packed us a delectable picnic lunch. We parked my car in the town, heading towards the woodland trail, usually accessed by many dog walkers, hikers and mountain cyclists alike. But not on this day. The trail was exceedingly quiet for some reason, unusually so, as we didn't see a single solitary soul accessing the woods that day. It was a beautiful day. Soft shafts of twinkling sunlight cast a scattering of light droplets through the bronze boughs of the trees, peppering the fauna and flora with prisms of colourful light, like you might get when a sunlight beam is broken up against a crystal pendant. So pretty rainbows of this colourful flickering light, in shades of purple, pink, blue and yellow, danced over the forest so magically. The trees in this woodland sanctuary were primary hickory and oak. They stood up proud and tall, with weighty girths, masterful, imposing, full, tall boughs, reaching up high in the canopy above our heads, selectively deciding how much light was permitted to steal its way through the branches. This sumptuous congenial oasis was covered with green shrubs, pretty woodland flowers, feathery ferns, resplendent verdant moss, carpeting rocks, bark, and areas of the dark earthen floor. We listened to the woodland birds chirping, watched squirrels darting up trees. We laughed and talked together as we ambled happily down a long, winding, precipitous trail. In a trice, things became airily quiet. It was more than a little bizarre. One moment everything was alive, enchanting, charming, with the tweets and warbles of birds. Then it was as if the forest was on mute, as if silence had been dutifully demanded of it. It was in this soundless silence that an unsettled feeling overcame me. The peaceful ambience I had thoroughly enjoyed moments before had been unfairly extinguished. Chills darted down my spine. I disturbedly sensed that something quite dreadful was loitering in the dark shadows. It was watching us with voracious eyes that seared our flesh like burning coals of invasive scrutiny. I glanced around the immediate area briefly, but I saw nothing. There was a sizable presence close to us. I could feel the heartbeat of the woods had distinctly changed. It had become heavier, torrid, clammy, airless, suffocatingly oppressive. Very disquieting. "Oh my God," said Giles, "this is just like my dream when the black leopard is stalking me. I have this discomposing feeling all over again. That also overcame me when I was on that escalators at Macy's. But this is so much worse." "Look," I said, putting a comforting hand on him, "let's get out of here now. I feel unsettled too. Everything has gone quiet. I feel something morose is watching us in the shadows. This is our cue to leave. I don't feel welcome here any more. Something's not right." "You know what," said Giles, "it's probably nothing. We're overreacting, that's all. Remember what my therapist taught me, to embrace every single day. I cannot allow a little trepidation, a few ambiguous, ambivalent feelings to upset me or ruffle my feathers, can I? We're planning to have a picnic in the wood grove. I'll be damned if I'll allow this paranoia to monopolise or overwhelm me. I told you I refuse to live like that anymore." "But it isn't paranoia," I insisted. "It's a gut instinct telling us to go now, to leave." All of a sudden, before I could protest any further, we heard a low guttural growl. "Did you hear that?" I asked Giles. He nodded. I could see the colour had literally faded from his face. It became ghostly white. I noticed even his eyes widened, and he said again, "Oh my God, Miranda, this is exactly like my premonition I told you about. Oh my word, every detail is coming true. Let's get out of here now before it's too late." We were about to turn around to retreat from whence we'd come, when we heard a cracking sound, almost as if someone was breaking a tree bough deliberately with their feet. A lonesome twig broke off the oak tree, floating to the ground, landing pointingly on Giles's sneaker. We both swiftly craned our heads ever upwards to stare at the upper boughs of the oak tree. I nearly fainted from shock, for what I saw was possibly the most terrifying thing that my eyes have ever beheld. I had to look away for a brief second to return my gaze. I was almost certain that this was a delusional trick of the light. I couldn't be seeing what I thought I was seeing. Surely not. I glanced up at the tree branch again. Standing there on the branch, larger than life, was the most vile-looking creature, of about 7 foot tall, covered in long flowing black hair, with a dog-like muzzle, sharp canine teeth, hostile deep-set dark eyes that gave off a red eye-shine. He looked like a demon humanoid dog, for he stood up on 2 feet, appearing bipedal. I wasn't sure if this was a Bigfoot or not, as he did have human-like hands and feet, with sharp talons for nails, not a flat nail bed. The head was shaped like a dog or a wolf, and he had a long tail that was thick and bushy, rather like an Alsatian. It twitched all the time, much like his nostrils did, and he breathed like a horse. I think Bigfoots are supposed to be like an ape, aren't they? But it could have been a Bigfoot. I'm not perfectly sure about that. He was the most petrifying thing my eyes have ever beheld before, grotesquely evil in every way. He thoroughly enjoyed the terror we exhibited, almost as if our fear was giving him a physical high. He was rather like something you'd expect to see on a brilliant costumed horror movie designed to perfection by Universal Studios. Only this entity was real. He was not fictitious. It was like he was toying with us as he threw down a couple more twigs from the upper branches towards us on the ground. We both flinched. I swear to you he laughed at us. "Run! Run! Run, Miranda! You go ahead of me, quickly, and I'll follow you." My legs felt like dead weights beneath me, as if all the energy they contained was now estranged from me. I pushed through this immobile concrete-like resistance that I experienced in my legs. Then I began to run. I could see Giles was running too, behind me. I looked back and stopped briefly, as the creature had jumped off the tree branch, just like a tabby cat, landing on the forest floor with a fluid buoyancy, and then he grabbed Giles by the collar of his shirt, with no trouble at all. Giles let out a scream as the creature tossed him in the air like a tennis ball, thoroughly enjoying his screams. They seemed to incite excitement within him. I picked up stones from the earthen ground, throwing them at the creature, screaming, "Get off my boyfriend! Leave him alone! Get off him! Stop it! Stop it!" But he ignored me. He didn't care about me at all. He began pulling off Giles's arm, and it came off. He just ripped it off. Then I could see Giles watching the creature. His eyes began to fade. He was calling to me, "Miranda, I love you. Be safe. Tell the parents I love them. Not to be sad." Then his words seemed to trickle away, rather like the rain flowing down a glass pane, and he drifted into unconsciousness. Then he died in 4 minutes flat. The creature continued to look at me, perched on the tree trunk, eating Giles's arm, as if it was a delicious chicken drumstick. He thoroughly enjoyed my horrified reaction. I just hightailed it out of there as fast as I possibly could. I couldn't watch any more. To cut a long story short, after the police arrived on the scene, Giles was found on the earthen floor, minus one arm and minus one leg, but the creature had long since gone. I certainly did not tell the police what I'd seen. I said that something black had chased us through the woods, and I hadn't seen what it was. I was not going to have the police think I was some weirdo, but I know what I saw, and I was not mistaken, for my eyes did not deceive me. Of course, his family was devastated about his untimely death, as was I, but we could not dismiss that Giles's premonition was startlingly accurate, so whether his time was up, based on a spiritual soul contract, I'll leave that for you to decide. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.